Grief is such an overpowering emotion, especially after losing someone so close to you. It can take months, years, even decades to get back to normal, if that's even possible after experiencing a significant loss. This podcast was created to help you move through and release the emotions, allowing you to heal the hurt and begin living again. Listen in as I chat with medical professionals, grief workers, and people who have first-hand experience in losing a loved one, what their experience has been, and what they did to help heal themselves and those around them. Life isn't always sunshine and rainbows, but I believe there is always a silver lining if you're willing to look. Welcome to the Release Podcast. Hey, welcome to another episode of Release. I have an excellent guest with me tonight. His name is Tony Lynch. He is the founder or co-founder, I guess I'm not really 100% sure, of the Global Grief Network. He has himself dealt with grief, and I want to get his perspective on how he navigates and handles his grief going forward and through all of these emotions and stages in life while continuing to help other people go through it as well. So, Tony, welcome to the podcast. And
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's an honor.
Absolutely. So I know the podcast is called Release. So we're talking about releasing the emotions, releasing the grief, releasing the everything that is all entangled with, death, life, moving through it, all of those things. So can you briefly, you don't have to go too deep, go as far as you're comfortable with going. Like, I want to preface that always. With your experience and what led you into the Global Grief Network, what led you down this path of grief, all of those things.
I think the defining part was losing my son. Mm-hmm. That actually opened up everything to where the grief started to show itself, and I didn't understand what it was. And what really made it spill out is soon after my son passed away, my mother passed away. Pretty much 2 years and 1 month apart. And what that did, it sent me in a spiral, right? You talk about going through the emotions. I didn't even know what grief was, right? No one ever, like being a male, no one ever tells us that this is what grief looks like. And then when you read the books, it looks totally nothing like what you're going through, right?
Right.
And so I used to watch people, male and female or both, that I know have gone through some things, and I watched what they did. And the difference was, there was some similarities, but then there were some differences. So then I started focusing on men, like, whoa, this is what you do when you're going through something like this. I realized real quickly that it wasn't that way neither, right? It was an individual thing. And so for the better part of almost 2.5, almost 3 years, I went through these emotions, had my ups, more downs, that spiral going down that rabbit hole and things like that. And I finally got to a point to where enough was enough. I didn't want to do it anymore. And I tried to take my life. I had planned out my suicide and everything, and I tried to take my life. In that moment, something had happened, and this is the transition as I'm starting to understand what all of these things are and started putting in the work, right, as far as trying to heal. It was in that moment, something just reminded me that this was normal, and what I was going through, I was going to have to lean into it, understand it, and begin to walk through the path. So I sought help, and this is how I got into the grief world. I sought help, looking for men's groups, someone I can be around to, kind of show me some things. And honestly, there was nothing out there. There was a lot of things for men and women. I mean, for women and children, and then families where the men could be included. So it dawned on me, men don't talk around women. That's why, no one knows what's going on with us, because it becomes more of, I'm in a group of women, I'm a man, and automatically I want to fix you, right? You know what I'm saying? I want to comfort you. So we take away, we're good at pushing off what we're going through in order to cater to other people. So that's what really started it. And once realizing there was nothing out there, I wanted to connect with other men first and foremost, but also have a space where we can come together and talk. So that's when I formed the nonprofit Memories of Us. That was 2021, in the middle of COVID,
Okay.
and started support groups and all of these things, and trying to get men to come together. And I started thinking, okay, what is the next step? Because I'm, like, this is not even scratching the surface of everything that's going on. And my grief revealed all of these different things from my childhood, from the time where I was in the gangs, and being homeless out on the streets, going to prison, being shot. And I started thinking, I was like, oh, I have to heal. I have to do
Powerful.
something to start this healing process. So what I did, as I started to release the grief, I took a backwards journey in my life, and I was honest with myself. These things did happen. What you brought me to the beginning, because it's just not the losses that get you. It's the deep embedded trauma that you've gone through, the PTSD, the all of these different things, all of the times you were told, men don't cry, you have to man up, you have to keep moving forward and things like that. Well, it doesn't work, right?
No.
So when I traced it to the source of when everything started changing, it took me back to when I was 6 years old. The
Mm.
first time I ever experienced grief, and I saw my twin classmates get burned alive.
Mm.
Yeah, so I was thinking to myself, like, whoa, man, because that hurt, right?
Yeah.
And I began to lean into it. And then 2 weeks later, I got molested. And then, throughout that time, I'm growing up in a single, my mom was a single mom. My dad was around, but my mom raised me. And being a boy, moms can get pretty heavy handed, especially,
Right. Yeah.
so I got my butt whipped a lot. And I had to understand that there's a difference between discipline and abuse, right? You know, um, you can only have so many welts on you before you start to think to yourself, like, this is not normal. So I
Right.
had to start healing from all of that as well. I had to start to heal from the anger that I carried with me. And so I started addressing those things because they carried over into my adulthood, right? And I knew I didn't want to be that person. So I started dissecting everything. I really just started dissecting everything and moved through life as if I was doing it all over again. But something had changed. I had became the man I needed to be for those different versions of me as I was moving through this life, the strength when I was homeless, um, having courage when I was in prison, um, being the sort of individual that I needed to be when I was in the gangs, and all of these different things. And I just began to just forgive myself for a lot of the things that I didn't know, for a lot of the things that I've done. Um, and once I began to forgive myself, I became gentle with myself. And I began to develop a mindset of I have to begin to love myself all over again, this new version, this new person of who I am. And that's when I began to release, just let these things go, right? Because you
Right.
can't carry it over with you into your adulthood, because then you just have angry individuals,
Right.
you
And then
know.
everyone else is paying for your
Right,
past that they didn't sign up for. No,
right.
that totally makes sense. That is a whole lot there. Holy moly.
But
One
it's
of the
the
things,
walk.
oh yeah, I don't ever think that you get like through grief. I don't ever think that there's an ending point. I think that personally one of my beliefs is when as soon as we're born we're experiencing grief, whether
Mhm.
that's not getting enough milk, whether that's having to burp, as an infant having to burp and not being able to, sitting in a soiled diaper, whatever, these grief things that come through, and it um just keeps going and going and going. There's no definitive beginning and a definitive end. It's just like all this gray area mushed
Right.
into one, shaken up a little bit, and then thrown out in the world.
Right. And you're
And
absolutely
so
right. I mean, you
it's
are, yeah,
so hard.
it is. Well, grief is not only messy, but it's individual and is
Right.
very revealing, right? So you're absolutely correct. Throughout your life, you're going to experience many things in grief, right? Um, and some of them going to hit a lot harder than others.
Oh
That you're
yeah, there's
going to
definitely
experience,
different
right?
levels.
Yeah, there's definitely different levels. And so yeah, but you can create um a rainbow in your grief,
I agree with that.
you know. And what I mean by that is that you can hold on to those memories, those good memories, the ones that made you laugh, right? When a person leaves you, whether it be a breakup or someone passes away, you know, you've created memories with these individuals. You have
Right.
moments that change your life, and it's switching your mind over and not focus on the moments that change your life, but focus on the moments that made you happy with that individual.
Right.
And you can carry that with you. It changes your mindset. It changes the way that you feel. It helps you forgive people, right? Including life. I heard something the other day, and it was a quote. Dave Roberts said it, and
Okay.
he said he had read a book, and the guy had said, "When did you forgive? When have you forgiven life for what it did to you?" So it was a whole new level and a whole new perspective, right? Something that you can add into your toolbox, right?
Yeah.
Um, Forgive people, forgive yourself, but most important, forgive life, right?
Right.
So
No,
those things help. They truly
it,
help.
well, you also touched on another one, men and emotions. Like it doesn't. So I'm also starting groups. I have groups with women only, just because women they don't open up and share as much if there's men around.
Right.
Just because they feel intimidated, they feel inferior, like all these things. They feel like they're going to be judged, all the stuff.
Mhm.
And so starting these, it's very interesting that you said that you started groups for men based on the same reasons, maybe not
Mhm.
necessarily the same, outcomes, like women are going to judge them, or I mean they may, and people judge all the time, like that's a normal part of life.
Right.
But it's definitely interesting when you think about men versus women, especially going through grief, because we process it much differently. We process it, just if you take men and women in general, if you put men and women together, we're always trying to, I don't know, it's just like nature. You're
Right.
trying
Yes.
to grandstand, or you're trying to like impress the other sex, just in general. Like it's not even, I think it's subconsciously that we're doing these things without even realizing we're doing these things.
Mhm.
So removing those, but it's interesting that you talk about that, and I really love the fact that you're starting these men's group, or not starting, but have started men's groups for these specific reasons why, and to help these gentlemen, process their grief and work through it, because it's not just one instance has not set you into a grief pattern.
Right. Yes.
You're in grief pattern your entire life, but it's how you navigate each instance of grief as to what dictates and determines,
Mhm.
going forward, and your attitude, your perseverance, all of these things. And I believe that everyone can learn whatever it is that they need to learn to be able to navigate that next phase, if you will, of your grief, or what life, whatever you want to call it.
Right. Well, I
So,
think one of the hardest things when it comes down to men is to admit that we are hurting, right?
right,
And this is why you see the statistics with men so high when it comes down to suicide or alcoholism or being incarcerated and things like that. No one ever looks at the underlying; they just look at the present. So,
right,
first thing when I'm with the men, I let them know that what you're feeling is totally normal. You are born with these emotions, and this is
right.
a place where you can let these out, right? You can talk, you can be angry, you can, you know, you can break down if that's what you need to. This is what we're here for, to support one another as we move through these things. And then secondly, you have to lean into your grief, right?
Right.
Your grief is a mentor. It's part of who you are. It's part of this life that we live in. Um, If you haven't experienced it, you will. It's
Right.
inevitable, right? And that's when I talk to the men, I let them know that, hey man, you're not by yourself. I know it can feel like a lonely road out here because we as men, this is the way we've always been taught, you know. But I remind them, you're not by yourself. All these things that you've gone through, every man, almost every man in this room, or in this group has gone through something similar. Sit down and talk to them, right? And then when you get them to open up, you build trust with them because you reveal a little bit about yourself. They're talking, they're bonding. What I found out as well, though, is that most women will do the same thing,
Hmm.
right? Even though that you're taught to embrace your emotions, depending on the generation, some women hold their emotions in as well. So it's very similar in how we
It
react
is.
to them. We don't think about the depression and the anxiety and the anger. We don't think about those times where, we're just zoned out into our own mind. We don't think about our mental health. We don't know that that's associated with it because the generation I grew up in, what was mental health?
It was non-existent.
It was non-existent. You got to pop upside your head until it got told to straighten up, right?
Right.
So a lot of that made us suppress those things.
Right.
And, so women from the same generation, maybe a little bit earlier as well, we've been, we got a lot of work to do when it comes down to healing. But I tell men that once you take the first step in healing, come up with a purpose why you want to heal. Is it for yourself? Is it for your family? Is it for being around friends? Is it, whatever you need to do to hold on to, because it's a hard road. The healing is hard,
It
right?
is hard.
It's something that you can hold on to, but you have to take the first steps. And I tell some of the women, I consult with some women and I tell them the same things. You have to take the first step. First off, hold yourself accountable, right? Because
Mhm.
some of the things that you're going to do that have done that you thought was right may not have been the right best decision.
Right.
I'm guilty of that. Have not always made the best decision. I'm a work in progress, but I'm still working at it, right? I'm not perfect. I just aim to be better than what I was,
Right.
especially in this healing journey, in this grief world and things like that. Um, so, after I did start Memories of Us, I started doing podcasting. And just like yourself, I focused mainly on men, right? Because I needed something, because I was feeling miserably. Oh my God, I wanted to give up. I really did.
Right.
The first year and a half during COVID and everything, I was like, oh man, I was going crazy. But then something had clicked. And I went, there's a way that I can use COVID to my advantage. Everybody's at home right now, right? So I started my podcasting, focusing on men, which in turn helped build up my support groups because people were going, "Oh my God, I didn't know this was out there." Um,
Right.
and then I started making the right connections in my community, and that led into everything else, which led into I believe that you were a part of the first conference.
I was.
Yes, the Global Grief Conference. I had thought about that, 2 years ago. And I just remember sitting around one day, and this is how the Global Grief Network was formed. So you kind of know the history on this one
Yeah.
a little bit. And I had the idea for a couple of years. I wanted to do something because I started making some connections with some amazing people in the grief world. And I loved the conversation, but I realized that we were so spread apart. And I came up the year, what's this year, 2021. And I said, you know, I want to do a grief conference. And I was talking to a production crew at the time. There's like, okay, what are you thinking? I said, you know what? I want to connect all of these grief workers and bring us in and do a global grief conference. It's not like I don't know the people. I know everybody from across the world now, just through
Right.
podcasting. And that's how that was born. In I started, we talked about it in January, February, somewhere around there. And we did it at the end of April. And we had such an amazing turnout that I made an annual thing. Yeah, actually that was 2022. So 2023, because we just did the last one. And that's how the Global Grief Network was formed, because As we finished up with the conference, there was a lot of response of people saying, hey, you mind if we stay into the group? I love the way that we know everyone, and we talking, and it's just a great place. But that did come after a podcast with someone. And even though I had already had this thought in my head, that's what I wanted to do, I brought in this other person and, tried to make it happen. And we did. And so the family of the Global Grief Network was born from that. And
Congratulations.
we're still growing strong. I've started another podcast. So, when I tell people about releasing your grief, you have to do the work. Realize where your grief is really stemming from, and address it. Go in there, forgive yourself if you need to, ask for mercy, cry, but lean into it. Receive what is giving you, because it's not all bad, even though it hurts.
Right.
It hurts. It'll make you honest with yourself. It'll hold you accountable for the things that you didn't know, and it'll teach you some things that you didn't, that you never thought you could learn. Grief, like I said, grief has been my biggest mentor. It's been my hardest teacher, but it's through that it's given me strength, it's given me wisdom, it's given me courage to want to do more. It revealed who I was, right?
Right.
Because through that, my heart opened up, and I realized that serving other people is what made me happy. And now that's all I want to do. I just want to serve. I want to see people heal. I want to give this thing that I carry around with me out to others, because I see the value that it has. Not everybody's going to go through that particular path, but whatever path that you choose, be honest to it, and it will reward you.
I agree. Just being intentional with the healing portion of the grief. There's a saying, and because I have a background for business and all that stuff in the marketing world and all that, and it's like let me see if I can get it right, or if I can butcher it, splendidly. It's the oh Lord, why is it? It is eluding me at this moment, but paraphrasing, it's like the path is always through. So,
yes.
Leaning into your grief and realizing, the first thing is realizing that you have grief, because a lot of people just, what is it? They work harder, they volunteer more, they throw themselves into whatever latest, greatest cause there is, and they just avoid it because they stick their head in the sands and think, this doesn't pertain to me. This is not mine. I read a book, I said a prayer, I threw some salt over my shoulder, and I'm good to go.
Yeah.
And it's just not the truth.
No.
Grief is extremely unique to each person. I liken it to your fingerprints. We all have a different way that we're going to process it, release it, move through it, move around it, move towards it, whatever it is that we have to do to it. And just chip away at this thing we call grief, and it's just so massive. But I love the fact that with the going back to the men and the emotions, and you touched on something extremely poignant that I want to bring up, and it was likening to the perfectionism that we have that are placed upon men and placed upon women to be these almost like statues that have no emotions. They never break. They continually are forced to be reckoned with, that they show only this one side and this one dimension that is just, I am here, this is it, no breakdown, no emotions, no tears, no nothing, just keep moving forward. And if you do, then you're stigmatized, you're whatever it is. And so I love that you brought that part up, because the society around us will condition us into these roles, into these characters.
Right. Yes. When you think about it, people only in times of trauma or deep sadness, we go back to the things that we know, the things that we see. So that is taught to us, from the generation above us. Our parents taught us this way, right? And then in turn, we teach our children that way if we don't know any better. So That's what we do. We go back to it. That's why you see the non-emotions. That's why you see people, male and female man up, because we never seen anyone break down, right?
Right. That's why you also see the abused become the abuser.
Uh-huh.
It's the
We
only
go
thing that they've known.
exactly.
Until
So
they decide to break that cycle and break that curse,
mhm,
break that link, it will always be that way.
yeah. It's kind of hard to tell people that you're wrong about doing something when that's the only thing that right?
Right.
Because it's just how it is through the generations. And we're it takes one person to say enough is enough. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to be like my parents, or I don't want to be like this individual or that individual, right? It takes one person to say enough is enough and to begin to develop their own individualism. And
Right.
it associates with your grief, right? Because you have to, eventually when it starts to manifest itself, you have to address those things. I still have moments where, it catches me off guard, and I may slip into a very dark place or a very depressive state. And sometimes it takes me a little bit to shake it, right? But I'm human.
Right.
I am definitely human. I'm not strong all the time.
Well, I think it is very indicative that you are human, but you're smart enough to realize. And I don't want to say smart like people are stupid. That's not it. But
Yeah.
it takes a very person intentional with healing their grief or starting the journey of healing your grief to realize when you're in this place,
Mhm.
to be able to know the steps and have almost, if you will, like a playbook on how to bring yourself back out.
Right.
It takes this is a journey in creating it. And so if you're just listening and just starting or just realizing that this is a journey that you're on or wanting to choose to be on, or if you're just thrown into it by losing a loved one that's very significant in your life,
Mhm.
it's hard and it's long,
It is, yes.
but
But
there are also rewards.
right, there's rewards. And I love what you said, having like a playlist, something that can help you bring you back. And I think that's part of the journaling. I
Yeah.
always encourage individuals, male, female, child, journal what you're going through on a day-to-day basis. So when you are in these moments, right, you can figure out what your triggers are. Then you can
Right.
start to work around not being around things that trigger you, because you have to identify those things. Uh,
Mhm.
but also, what did you do? Because the first time that it hits you, you did something to pull yourself out of it. Go back to
Right.
see what that was, see the situation, write it down, and go, this is what I did to do it. Whether it's playing music, or I'm being creative, or maybe it's picking up the phone. I always recommend people pick up the phone and call someone as well, because you never know what the other person on the other end may say to you.
Right.
It's
That's
something
true.
that you need to hear, right?
Yeah.
But I also recommend working out, right? That was my huge thing in the healing journey. I stayed in the gym, I worked out. After I had started getting myself back together, I was eating right, because the foods that you ingest will actually, dictate how your grief moves as well. Um, I often recommend, when you're tired, sleep. When you up, move around. Your grief has to move through your body. So move it around, right? Get that out of there. Go dancing, when you're ready, go out with your girls or go out with your fellas and stuff, people that's going to embrace you in this journey
Right.
and walk with you, right? I always recommend that as well. Have yourself a grief partner, right? Someone
Yeah.
someone that you can call to when you need them the most, and let that person walk with you. But also in return, walk with them,
Yeah.
walk with
Big
them.
thing. It's not a one-way street. It's always a
Uh,
two-way street.
yeah.
No, I love that journaling. And I'm not, mm. So part of my grief journey is I wrote books. I have a couple of them.
Mhm.
But when I was younger, my father always told me he was a career criminal. And he always told me, don't put anything on paper because this is how you will get caught. They can always go back, it's there forever, whatever, all those things.
Mhm.
And so one of my biggest things is I've never been a journaler for part of that reason. It's like, okay, so I'm writing down my most intimate thoughts on a piece of paper in a book that someone could potentially go and grab and use against me at a later point in time. This is immediately where my brain goes to all the time, all the
Yeah.
time.
Yep.
And so like I have stories out there, like these books are filled with stories of my journey of grief, of my childhood, but they're stories that I have crafted. They're mine. And so they're the ones that I'm okay with being out there.
Mhm.
So what would you say to someone that just, like with the journaling, and I do journal every now and then, but as I start to journal, I find myself going to that point. Well, okay, don't put this in there because it could come back to later bite you in the ass.
Right.
Okay, don't put this in there. Okay, let's just schmooze around this piece, whatever. So in essence, I'm not really journaling because my thinking portion has already taken over and I'm not letting the emotions out. And I
Right.
realize this about myself. So I'm really trying to, but then it's just, okay, don't journal. That's your solution. So what do you say to someone who is on that path?
Um, think of it this way. You don't have to put everything in there. You just
Mhm.
have to write down how you're feeling,
Okay.
right? You know what I'm saying? You don't have to go into details. You can say, in this moment, I did this today and I feel this way, right?
Okay, that makes sense.
So you're not, you still being intimate because only you know what those words mean. If someone else was to read it, they'll just see you expressing your emotions, right?
Right.
But you can always go back through and go, oh man, that's what it, because I do the same thing. When I write things down, um, I used to think, what if someone sees this and uses this against me? I did the same thing. But then when you have it happen to you, like I did, I had it happen to me.
Mm.
And finally I just went like this. I said, you know what? If that's the best that they got is to use what I'm going through against me, I think I'm doing pretty good because I'm living rent free in your head now, right?
That's
So
a good
I
point.
it's a reverse psychology for me. If you're going to take what I said and use it against me, for one, that proves your integrity towards me. I've already made a decision to walk away from you. I don't need that sort of thing around me. Secondly, you took the time to use this against me. You must have been bored in your life. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know that you was thinking about me. And thirdly, now that I know all of these things, I know I'm living rent free in your head.
Mm-hmm.
I've eliminated anything that you can ever do to me now. I've
Gotcha.
taken ownership of mine because I know what I wrote down, right?
Right.
If someone wants to try to use it against me, okay, that's fine. I got nothing to hide. What you gonna tell someone? So you
That
can't
is
be,
pretty powerful. I like
yeah, you
that.
can't, you got to take that control back and not be afraid of what people are going to say about it,
And
right?
it's part of the grief journey.
It's
Yeah.
part of your grief journey. You have to be, it's an honesty with yourself. And if
Mm-hmm.
other people want to read that and, saying, take your honesty and use it against you, that's fine. That's
I
fine.
think it's also a lot of deconditioning too from the childhood, the
Uh-huh.
don't write anything down because it could be. I'm not a criminal. I don't do things, criminally to go to jail and have anything used against me,
Right.
So, but it's fascinating that that's where my mind automatically goes to. And so I recognize that that is a conditioning phase of my
Mhm.
childhood,
Mhm.
that I have to work through and
Right.
around over whatever and to get to the other side. So I have started journaling, uh, not frequently, but probably once a month. So I'm trying to get there, and it's better than what I used to, which was never, ever, maybe once
Right.
every 10 years, because it was just, but something. So I'm going to skip back to, so when I lost my stepdaughter in 2016, I'm not sure what it triggered in my head at the time, but I distinctly have a memory of waking up, or we were heading to bed, and it was shortly after we lost her, maybe 2 weeks, and going to bed, and I instantly sat back up, flipped my light on, and I journaled, and I just journaled for about 2 weeks straight, every day, sometimes morning and night, and I just put all of those emotions down on paper.
Yeah.
And then I didn't journal again for years. But then I would journal again. And then I didn't journal again for years. But I remember at that moment in time that when I journaled and I put all of those immediate thoughts and emotions and fears and anguish down on paper, I
Mhm.
felt better. With each page that I wrote, I felt better because it was not bottled up inside anymore.
Right.
So I know there is extreme power in journaling, especially when you're suffering from an acute grief instance,
Right.
that it's just powerful to get through. And I'm working towards becoming more, should I say, fluid with it, or more consistent with it, I should say.
Well, that takes time, right?
Mhm,
Because you're ready when you're ready.
mhm. Okay.
It's not, there's no, like you said before, there's no time limit to grief. There's no right or wrong way to do it, right? You have to figure out what works for you. And so, you take your time. When you're ready to write down what you're going through, you'll write it down. When you're
Sure.
ready to not only be vulnerable, and when I'm not talking about anyone else, when you're ready to be vulnerable with yourself and to admit that this hurts,
Right.
you admit that this hurts, this is the way I feel in these moments, and you will realize that you will have those moments throughout the day, right? And when you're transparent with yourself, nothing else really matters because it's for you. So what if someone else picks it up? It's still for you. What are they going
Yeah.
to, how are they going to react when they see it? It's still for you.
And I guess if it
That's
bothers
all
them, they
that.
shouldn't have been reading it.
Exactly, exactly. If you say that this is my journal and someone else picks it up, then they being nosy.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They're
That's
just being
true. That's
nosy. So
true.
they see they get what they get. I might write something there. I don't like Billy Bob. If Billy Bob reads it, he gonna know that I don't like him, right?
Right?
I didn't tell him to read it. We could have pretended that we was friends, and you didn't have to know I didn't like
Right? That's
you know.
true. That's true.
But I make jokes about that. I'm pretty fair when it comes down to that. If I don't like somebody, I stay away from them. I make
Right.
it apparent I'm not going to try to be your friend or anything like that. But when you put those words down on paper, there's a sense of truth that comes along with that, right? Because you can always go back, especially if you're having that emotion again, you're starting to fight it, right? And
Mhm.
it does something different, you can always go back and go, oh, I've already felt this emotion before. This is what I did, throughout the day. At the end of the day, I was feeling better,
Right.
right?
Okay.
You always have a reference, you always have your own self guide. That's
You're
what
creating
journal
your own
is,
playbook.
right? There you go, you're creating your own playbook, right? You know what I'm saying? And it's yours, it's customized to you,
Right. Not something somebody else did or
right?
said or is trying to market to you. It's your own.
Yeah, it's your own. You may have picked up tools from individuals
Right.
along the way, right? Some may work, some may not. But you can always put in your book, today I learned about this. I learned about this. I learned these are tools in your toolbox, right? And over a period of time, you may not use them all at one time, but you can always go back and go, oh man, I remember I wrote this down right here. I'm going to explore this right here, right? Maybe it may help, it may not, but you have something. Um, don't be afraid to hold on to other people's tools and their belief systems, or whatever can work for you, as long as it's positive and it can lift you up, because we mimic what we see,
Right.
right?
I
So
agree with that.
yeah, you gotta create your playbook, right? It's not, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a therapist at all. Don't I don't recommend people medicine or anything like that. I just give suggestions. Find somebody
Right.
that can give you some good positive suggestions, especially when you're down and out. Oh man.
Yes. Finding that trusted person
Hmm.
that will give you the best advice based on your situation, that it's not that they have no control over the outcome. So they're not going to benefit from it at all. So
Right.
They're not going to steer you and guide you in the wrong direction and give you bad advice or tell you to go drink a fifth of whiskey and, call them in the morning or something like that, because or to just go hang out with the guys and go bar hopping or something like that. Cause
Mhm.
that's not going to be the best case scenario. I would say 99.999% of the time. Um, but what would you suggest? So say you've got, there's a gentleman listening, and say he's in grief. Say he's just lost someone significant in his life, and he's just decided to work harder, work longer hours, just keep going and just keep shoving that down, shoving it down, shoving it down. What's it on a typical day? And I know this is not for everyone, but what will it look like for them if when they start realizing that they have an issue that they need to deal with?
A lot of times, this is where it comes in when um, they get told that they need to take a break from their job to lessen, because employees pay attention to that as well. Now, don't get me wrong, they're going to love that you're working, but also
Right.
they're going to realize why you're doing it, and they're going to see you start to get tired. They're going to see you start to get grumpy and things like that. Well, they're going to distinguish the two and say, hey, maybe you need to take some time to yourself. Take about a couple of weeks off, right? Most jobs will give you 2 weeks out there for bereavement or whatever, which is not nearly enough. But during that time, depending on how long they've been suppressing it, when they begin to sit with themselves, is when their mind is really going to start to push it forward. And you're going to find yourself, tired and depressed. You're going to find yourself wanting to cry, isolating from everything, because it's all part of the process. You're going to find yourself isolating. When you get into those moments, allow yourself to cry, right? Have someone on your phone that you can talk to, someone that talked to you before then, right? And maybe still send you a text or call you once in a while, even if you don't answer the phone, just to let you know. Pick up the phone and call that person. Tell
Right.
that individual, either you need to talk or you need that person to come over to sit with you for a little bit. Allow yourself to feel, allow yourself to go into those places, because you can't avoid them. Don't avoid them. Don't be afraid to sit with yourself. Don't be afraid to ask for help. But most importantly, don't forget to breathe. Do not forget to breathe, because when you forget to breathe, you start thinking real devious thoughts, right?
Right.
So you always want to breathe. Make sure that um, you have something around you that will remind you of that loved one, because a picture or piece of clothing or something like that, that you can still smell them, that's going to remind you and make you laugh, that's going to help you grab onto something to start to pull yourself out. um, and then when you get to that point, rest. Rest. It's a long battle, and when you get up, call someone, talk to somebody, um, and just lean into that individual, and allow that person to lean into you, and get a hug. Human connection is really, really important. Get someone who's going to hug you
Powerful.
tight. It's powerful, right? That's coming from a male. Find someone who's
Right.
going to hug you. So, find someone who's going to sit with you in silence, right? Find someone who's going to allow you um, to just be in those moments. That's really, really important. Not someone who's going to compare stories with you. It's not a competition. It's, as we men call it, trade battle stories. I got something that can top you. Women do the same thing, right? But
You do.
um, find someone who's not going to trade war stories with you. They just want to be there with you to make sure that you're good, right? Uh,
Right.
and just be open. Really, really, honestly, just be open. If you're not doing well, be honest with it, because
Right.
no
Yeah, like
one
it's a big
can.
one.
Yeah, that's a huge one, right? Because
Like,
no
how are
one
you?
knows.
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Yep,
That's the
yep,
typical answer. I'm fine.
yep. That's
Because
normally
you're
how it goes.
afraid that if you say anything else, the floodgates will open. Then people will start thinking, oh my gosh, they're either suicidal or they're just on the crazy train or whatever, so it's just
Mhm.
easier. I'm fine, everything's fine, it's
Yep.
all fine.
Yeah. But that goes to something that I heard not too long ago, and it's the truth. Um, this guy was asking his friend had was going through something horrible, and so they was working in the garage and everything, and his friend asked him, he goes, what's the biggest lie you ever told? The guy
Mm,
looked at him and said, I'm fine.
that's a good one.
Yeah. And the guy said, no, 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 you don't understand. I know you're fine, but what's the biggest lie that you ever told? The guy looked at him and said, I'm fine. When it hit the dude what he was saying, he turned around and said, I'm fine too. That's the
Mm.
biggest lie that you can ever tell yourself or even tell someone else. When you tell me that you're fine, I look at you and go,
Something is not fine.
yeah. Well, I don't bring out the obvious. I just look at him and
Right,
go, you know what? I'm fine too. Let me know when you want to talk.
right.
I'll leave it like that, right? Because I'm not forcing the situation, I'm not forcing the conversation. But now, this dude understands that I understood what you just said.
Right,
I'm fine too, right?
right,
That's what we do. We deflect those things back at people because for one, we don't want to be a burden. Two,
right.
if you're a male, you're carrying some sort of shame or guilt with you. You don't want anybody to understand that. And when people are conditioned to hearing the word "I'm fine," you usually let it go,
Hmm.
right? But it takes an individual that understands what you just said behind the meaning to go, yeah, I get it. Let me know
Yeah.
when you want to talk. I'll be over here.
Lets them know that you see them and you hear them and you
Exactly. I'm
understand
validating.
exactly what they're going through. Maybe not
Uh-huh.
exactly what they're going through, but that they're going through something. That's.
Hmm. Well, I get a lot of times because I look a lot younger than what I am. I get a lot of older guys go, "What do you know about what I'm going through?" I try not to get personal, right? But I
Mhm.
understand, what I'm saying? We got a man in front of me. He's just like I was, you know what I'm saying? What do you know about anything what I'm going through? Boy, you can't be no more than 30 some years old. And I look at him and go, yeah, I wish, you know.
Right.
But just to open up the doors, I've lost this, and this. I've had to go through this. And so I'm just putting out the bases in there, and they can look at me and go, what? I go, yeah. So now I have that attention with them, right? And then I can open up the doors. What's really going on with you, man? You know, oh man, this is what's going on. I can then
Right.
hold that space with them, right? Because they've invited me in, right? And I'm going to visit with them. And so it becomes a beautiful thing. The biggest lie that you can ever tell anyone is that you're fine.
That is so true. I love that. That is powerful. Like, okay, I'm fine too. I love that.
Yeah.
So, kind of just wrapping this up, is there anything else you want to throw in for gentlemen that may be listening to this that may need a kind of like a guide on a path on where to start, like begin here, do this, anything like that?
Well, the biggest thing I would tell the guy when he starts this road is when he's tired of the road that he's on.
Mm,
You know, and that's the biggest thing that I could tell him. When you want to heal, you'll be tired of the road that you're on. You'll be tired of feeling the way that you are. And once you start on that road, you have people that will walk with you. And it's okay. It's okay to be fine. It's not okay to it's not okay to hurt in silence because we got too many of us that are doing that right now.
I agree.
So it's okay to be fine. I understand what you're saying, but just remember, you have people that will walk with you. Reach out to me, go to my website, reach out to me, or find me on Facebook. I'm easy to find. Look up Memories of Us. Find me on Instagram. Reach out to me. And if you don't want to reach out to me, I have other colleagues, male colleagues that may fit you as well. So um, we're doing our part. We just want you to come in so you can do your part too.
Right.
You know.
Well, that's great. So, Tony, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate the perspective that you bring for males. Maybe not like all the perspectives, but you bring a good perspective for men to be able to begin this in a solid foundation for them to start. And I'll link all of the links down below for his website, the memories of us, his Instagram, all the links that you need to be able to begin if you choose to. If you need to find someone else, all of that will be linked below as well. Tony, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I greatly appreciate it. And stay tuned for the next one.
Thank you. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of Release. All the links plus a few extras are posted in the show notes below. And if you think someone you know could benefit by listening to this episode, please share it with them. And as always, keep going, keep being, keep doing. You are amazing.